Hi everyone, welcome to my video. Here let us have a glance on the concept of vectors and algebra of vectors, which are realized to be the ideal tool for the fruitful study of many ideas in geometry and physics. Vectors was introduced by H.G. Grassmann in the 19th century and developed by J.B. Gibbs in the same era. This term vector is derived from the Latin word vehere, which means to carry. Vectors are now the modern language of a great deal of physics and applied mathematics. Before going into the applications of vector, we need to know about vectors, which demands the understanding of scalars. What is a scalar? A scalar is a quantity that has only magnitude and no direction. Examples of scalar quantity are mass, length, time, etc. Scalar quantity can change in terms of its magnitude only. The resultant of two scalars will always be a scalar quantity. That is a scalar. Then, what is a vector? A vector is a quantity that has both directions as well as magnitude. Examples of vector quantity are velocity, accelerations, etc. Vector quantity can change in terms of either magnitude or its direction of application. The resultant of two vectors can either be a scalar or a vector quantity. A vector has a tail and a tip. The tail point A is called the initial point and the tip point P is called the terminal point of the vector A vector. The initial point of a vector is also taken as the origin of vector. The undirected line AB is called the support of a vector. A vector can be identified in different types. Let us learn about some of them. Vectors which have freedom of choice in the position of origin is called free vectors. Vectors which have a specified point in the position of origin are called as localized vectors. A group of vectors which have same initial point are called as co-initial vectors. A group of vectors which have same terminal point are called as coterminous vectors. Vectors which have same line of action are called as collinear vectors. Vectors which lie on the same plane are called as coplanar vectors. Vectors which have the line of action parallel to each other are called as parallel vectors. Vectors which have the same direction and magnitude are called as equal vectors. Vectors which have same direction are called as like vectors and which have opposite directions are called as unlike vectors. These are some of the vectors types. Now, let us discuss about the algebra of vectors. Algebra of vectors consists of three algebraic operations on vectors, namely addition of vectors, difference between vectors, and scalar multiplication of vectors. Addition of vectors can be done by following any one of the two laws, triangle law of addition and parallelogram law of addition. Let us know about them one by one. If two vectors are represented in magnitude and direction by two sides of a triangle taken in order, then their sum is represented by the third side taken in the reverse order. This is the triangle law of addition. In a parallelogram OABC, if OA vector and OB vector represents the adjacent sides of a parallelogram, then the diagonal OC vector represents their sum. This is the parallelogram law of addition of vectors. Before learning about difference between two vectors, we need to learn about reverse of a vector. What is reverse of a vector? If A vector is a vector, then its reverse, denoted by minus A vector, is defined as a vector having a magnitude of A vector and the direction opposite to the direction of A vector. Difference between two vectors is found by adding a vector and reverse of another vector. if A vector and B vector represents the two adjacent sides of a parallelogram, then the diagonals be represented as A vector plus B vector and A vector minus B vector. Let A vector be a vector and M be a scalar. Then the vector MA vector is called the scalar multiple of A vector by the scalar M. Two vectors A vector and B vector are said to be parallel if A vector is equal to lambda B vector, where lambda is a scalar. If lambda greater than 0, then they are in the same direction, and if lambda less than 0, then they are in the opposite direction to each other. Guys, we have discussed about the algebra of vectors. Vectors and its algebra play a major role in the usage of cannons in military, for scoring a goal, for hitting a six, etc. in the field of sports, in identifying the distance of the target and required speed in the field of gaming, in designing the roller coaster rides while crossing a river with a boat, and many more. We have a better understanding about vectors when we learn it with real-world applications, since vectors are utilized in day-to-day life to assist in the localization of people, places, and things. See you in the next video. Until that, understand the concepts with real-world applications. This is Pradeep signing off.